Ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to speak on Islam in Europe, but generally about religion and its place in Europe and in the UK. So I will do that, starting with secularism, but ending on a particular issue that I'm involved in, and I think which is an issue of significance, which Jonathan mentioned in passing, which is the issue of religious freedom. The renowned sociologist of religion, Jose Casanova, wrote of a paradox in the discussion of religion in the contemporary world, namely that scholars of religion are questioning the validity of the category of religion at the very same time when the discursive reality of religion is more widespread than ever and has become for the first time global. But the place of religion in public or private life, its place in social, ethical and political discourse, is now hugely contested in Europe. For many people, the individualization of religion, not as a transcendental experience, but as a value-laden normative ethics, has become the most important phenomenon of religion today. With the advances in sciences and medicine, with an increased awareness of world poverty, the issues of socio-economic injustice related with it, the shift in gender roles and expectations, the social and political impact of modern life and globalization, the demise of structured and more formal expressions of religious allegiance, something markedly different is taking place in both the private and the public domain. When whole areas of personal, ethical and political life are being rethought against the background of scripture and tradition, this must be viewed as a radical shift in religious consciousness. This religious consciousness has both a public and a private face to it. The question, however, is what we mean by public and what we mean by private. In assessing the multiple and complex reflections of religion and religious values today, scholars of religion have to address the issue of secularism and secularization, and how these two terms are intertwined with the way we view religion as a public or private phenomenon. In his seminal work, The Secular City, Harvey Cox provides a distinction between secularism as an ideology and secularization as a liberating worldview, a historical process almost certainly irreversible, in which society and culture are delivered from tutelage to religious control and closed metaphysical worldviews. Secularization, like religion, is difficult to define because today the term is used rather loosely and ambiguously in both academic and lay debates. But it points to one key factor, which is that at least in most of the West, religion has lost its public hold. Religion may still have its connective and collective attraction, binding people together, as Charles Taylor states, but society is one in which even faith, for the staunchest believer, is just one possibility amongst others. Today, many understand the religious and the secular as a conversation or clash between two opposing concepts. This is incorrect. Furthermore, religion has no specific legal definition, but its influence and impact in society is often assessed through legal cases. And this has happened for various reasons, but partly because of the frequent media attention given to contesting whether religion is a force for good or bad in the modern world. And here it's specifically theistic faith, seen as something which directs us to an intolerant past, whereas secularism grounds us in individual freedom and orients us towards a hopeful future. The debate has a simple premise, which is that a gradual secularization of most of the Western world has been realized through a conscious and enlightened distance between church and state, especially after the bloody religious wars of early modern Europe, leading eventually to healthy liberal democracies. And the roots of this go back to the Reformation, about which the American sociologist Peter Berger wrote, "Protestantism cut the umbilical cord between heaven and earth." The crux of the debate is not about religion versus the secular and their mutual interdependence, but whether religious expression is undergoing the kind of revival which may threaten or destabilize the relatively calm, well-ordered, public and pluralist spheres of most Western countries. To this debate must be added Europe's own soul-searching of her own cultural and political future. Europe sees her past and future as Christian secular, where the Islamic presence is becoming increasingly problematic. The conflicts of recent years have made this issue even more complex. While I personally would reject the claim that 9/11 brought religion back, what September 11th did do was convince many onlookers that religious expression could quite easily be equated with religious fanaticism, and religious fanaticism could have its root in the interpretation of those very scriptures held sacred by millions. The public-private dichotomy has been exacerbated in recent years with the visibility of minority faiths, bringing into question the very value of diversity. It is this visibility and the right of self-determination which reverberates from the wearing of crucifixes, the headscarf in France, to Turkey's entry into the EU. When it comes to Islam, attitudes to women, penal law, and issues of honor within the framework of an ill-perceived Sharia law are very often the things which seem to define the Islamic presence in Europe. And it is this aspect of religious determinism which many European citizens of all backgrounds find unsettling to their personal, social, and political identity. While most European countries have developed particular models of state-church relations, rarely today in Europe do political leaders take religious organizations as representatives of comprehensive ideological movements. These are viewed almost exclusively as interest groups with a moral agenda, where the religious leaders speak as moral authorities, not leaders of mass movements. And this is where the current conflict with Islam resides, and has been compounded in recent times with big stories which have received global media coverage. A significant example was that of the Danish cartoon crisis in 2005. The 12 cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, published in September 2005 in the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten, resulted in outbreaks of violence by some Muslims and sparked off the deeper debate: can Islam in the Muslim world really understand, accept, and respect the notion of civil, diverse societies, where there are competing moralities, divergent discourses, where in some ways nothing is held sacred anymore and everything is up for critique? Perhaps this is a price for freedom of expression, but the violence within certain Muslim communities confirmed the suspicion many have that Islam could be a complete idiosyncrasy in the West. In October 2006, the then leader of the House of Commons, Jack Straw, created a national furore when he suggested that Muslim women should take off their face veils when they came to his surgery, as it was a sign of separation. While he acknowledged he didn't wish to be prescriptive, that the immediate context of his concern were the Muslim women visiting his surgery, the issue grabbed media headlines for days. The increasing visibility of the hijab and the niqab has been one of the most potent signs of female identity in recent years. Muslim and non-Muslim voices argued for and against veiling, right to self-expression, and some commentators reiterated the ever-popular clash of civilizations theory. But why should a piece of clothing attract such social furore, where all the struggles of human rights, religious expression, and political identity seem to collapse or converge? I think it's mainly because the veil has changed as an iconic image. It no longer conjures up images of the mystery and lure of the East. It has come to represent everything the West has struggled against. For many, the wearing of the niqab and even the hijab may not be unlawful, but form part of an ideology with no place in modern life. Yet curiously, it is this very covering which continues to be contested in a place like Turkey. Issues around the religious freedom of the individual and the rights of society as a whole can be quite heavily contested in the current climate. And in the UK and in Western Europe, one sees two quite distinct trends emerging. One is that in the age of globalization, when all forms of media are weaving together the world into a new social fabric, militant/extremist religious expression is the one force which could tear society and civilizations apart. And the second is the visibility of minority communities in the West, which often assert themselves with a more fundamentalist and rights-based language. This has become particularly, though not exclusively, associated with Islam, in which the most highlighted version appears to many and is Islam which is intolerant in itself, but which demands tolerance from others. For many Europeans, a tolerant public sphere is itself under threat from a competitive rather than constructive form of religious discourse. But it's not just the visibility of difference, but the implications of this difference, which is unsettling. The bombings on London's public transport in July 2005 sparked off the debate that multiculturalism, which is in essence a way of preserving equal citizenship for marginal ethnic groups, had failed. Many felt that British Muslims harboured no loyalty to Britain, and the question now turned to the question of values. Do Muslims hold different values, which will inevitably clash with the values of liberal democracies and civil societies of the West? A fundamental problem with such questions is that they are still generally premised on viewing minority groups as monolithic in their identity and self-expression. Even though many now distinguish between a normative Islam and Islamism, cultural, linguistic, ethnic differences are often overlooked and the individual becomes a collective. Other religions face similar issues, but the Muslim collective is often singled out as more isolationist than other communities and unwilling to buy into a trajectory of liberalism, which demands a level of separation between the spiritual and the temporal. Thus, much of today's debate on religion and secularism in Europe is fundamentally about how to integrate Muslim communities into European societies. While thousands of Muslims do live full integrated lives, their religion is often presented and lived as a definite system of beliefs and non-beliefs, which cannot be submitted to any critical inquiry. The discussions around the failure of multiculturalism in the public sphere have also led to renewed interest in the question of citizenship. On a personal note, I strongly believe that there is a difference between being a citizen and being a good citizen, and actually the state itself may have very little to do with the option I choose. Despite its primacy as a fundamental political structure in society and its vast reach, the state remains limited in scope and operation in regard to the dynamics of social relations. So if I feel myself to be a British citizen, then why do I feel this? We should acknowledge that citizenship is not simply tied to having the protection of the right passport or being able to vote and not breaking the law. Rather, to feel a true citizen, a fundamental requirement is a sense of belonging. In Western Europe generally, cultural and religious diversity pose challenges, but still allow at times that we compare and contrast value systems and different lifestyles, so we can dialogue towards building more universal values. But we'll have to make some choices about what we tolerate and what we keep out. And this is fundamentally a debate about ethics, because I strongly believe even diversity has its limits. For all of us, this means in the end that if we are truly living in the presence of God, we need to have the conviction that our faiths and cultures can have a positive impact and work for the welfare of the wider society, the public good. But we must also have the courage and the humility to speak out against what the theologian calls the malfunctions of faith. How does the expression of my faith create an injustice for someone else? No language is as emotive as religious language. To conclude, we live increasingly in a world of diaspora religious communities in which all religions are everywhere, often governed by largely secular regimes. Can the state protect religious freedom when there are different ways of defining religion, different ways of practicing the same faith? And can lived religion in all its manifestations really always be protected by the law, especially when the state is not allowed to decide on what counts as religion and what does not? The issue of religious freedom, just my last point. Religious freedom as a modern problem of liberalism. Perhaps no other freedom today is as contested as religious freedom across cultures, because it's difficult to agree on its moral and social significance in the ever-shifting hierarchy of human needs and rights. At a time when the very place of religion in public life is feverishly debated, religious freedom is increasingly viewed by some as a last hurdle in the fight for human dignity. But religious freedom, unlike many other freedoms, even if it's recognized, is not necessarily valued. Religious faith has the potential to become an emotive issue amongst those even who have secular outlooks. This attitude is not confined to any one religion, but is manifest more in communities which understand religious freedom as a duty to practice only one faith, and for whom diversity and plurality of faiths and outlook poses a challenge to God's will rather than a reflection of God's will. The paradox is that in all the freedoms we talk about today, religious freedom as a given in society may be something unique to liberal democracies alone. So I leave you with a thought. Will this issue be of any meaningful significance in those countries not far from here undergoing their own intellectual and social revolution? It matters because globalization means that what happens in the caves of Yemen, the streets of Jerusalem, the malls of Dubai, resonates in the lives of ordinary people in the largely secular countries of Western Europe. Thank you.